There's a strange, almost spiritual shift that happens the moment you truly let go. Not the kind of letting go where you're just pretending, checking your phone, hoping they'll call. I'm talking about the real kind. The moment your soul exhales and says, I'm done, not bitter, not angry, just done. It's powerful, it's silent, and it changes everything, because when you move on, not out of revenge, but from healing, your energy shifts, and that shift is what people feel before they even realize what they lost. When you truly move on, you stop making them the center of your world. You stop living in the memories and start living in now. You stop waiting and start building. You stop wondering, will they come back? And start asking, how can I come back to me? That's when the magic happens. That's when people who once disappeared suddenly feel your absence like a weight in the room. They don't feel your desperation anymore. They feel your distance, and that distance wakes them up. You stop reacting and start responding, and in that shift, you take back your emotional power. Before, you may have felt constantly on edge, as if every message or lack thereof dictated your mood. A simple scene without a reply could spiral you into hours of overthinking. One moment of coldness could send you into panic, wondering what you did wrong, how you could fix it, and how to get back to that temporary warmth you once felt. You weren't just reacting to them. You were reacting to the version of yourself that felt unworthy without their presence. That emotional volatility wasn't because you were weak. It was because you cared deeply and had forgotten how to anchor yourself in your own center. But something shifts when you begin healing. You stop letting outside behavior control your inner world. You stop jumping at the sound of a notification or reading between lines that don't exist. Instead of immediately replying to every text out of fear of seeming distant, you pause. You ask yourself, what does my truth say here? What do I feel? Not from anxiety, but from alignment. You stop playing out emotional habits. You begin creating space between the trigger and the choice. You no longer act from a place of panic. You respond from a place of peace. This shift doesn't mean you go cold. It means you become clear. You no longer feel the need to match their energy. You maintain your own. When they show up with half effort or confusion, you don't spiral. You evaluate. You don't lash out. You don't shrink. You no longer need to defend your worth with long explanations or emotional breakdowns. Your silence becomes a mirror, your words become intentional, and your energy becomes grounded. You're no longer auditioning for their attention. You're measuring their presence. When you respond instead of react, you send a very different message. Both to them and to yourself. To them, you communicate that your emotions are not up for manipulation. That you are no longer easily swayed by push and pull behavior, that they don't get to disrupt your peace just by showing up inconsistently. To yourself, you affirm that you are safe in your own skin, that you trust yourself to pause, to breathe, and to move from intention rather than impulse. You become emotionally sovereign, and that emotional sovereignty is rare, it's attractive, it's powerful. Because in a world full of people trying to win love by being hyper-available, you stand out by being emotionally secure, not hard-hearted, but clear-hearted. You still care, but you don't chase. You still feel, but you don't lose yourself in the feeling. You still want connection, but not at the cost of your self-respect. And when you start responding instead of reacting, the game changes, not just in your relationship with them, but in your relationship with yourself. You invest in your growth, not in their return, and that shift rewires everything. At some point, you realize you've spent so much time focused outward, on what they're doing, who they're talking to, whether they'll come back, that you've unintentionally abandoned the one person who needed your attention most, you. When your mind is constantly consumed by someone else's actions, you begin to put your life on hold, waiting for closure, for change, for an apology, for a second chance. Days blur into weeks, and you start to feel like you're living in a holding pattern, orbiting a relationship that no longer exists in the present. But there's a moment, and it's subtle, when you get tired. Tired of watching, tired of hoping, tired of making your healing dependent on someone else's decisions, and in that quiet exhaustion, you shift inward. You start asking new questions. What makes me feel alive? What do I want to create? How can I build a life I actually love living? These questions aren't about them. They're about you reclaiming your time, your mind, and your future. You begin doing things not to distract yourself from the pain, but to transform it. You pick up books that challenge your thinking, You join a gym not to get revenge with a glow up, but to reconnect with your body. You rebuild friendships that you may have neglected. You start a business, take a class, launch a project. Whatever it is, it becomes less about proving something to them and more about proving something to you. You begin honoring your growth not as a performance, but as a path. This kind of growth is powerful because it's rooted in truth, not ego. You're not pretending to be over it. You're actively moving through it. You stop needing their validation to feel like you're progressing. You stop checking to see if they've noticed your transformation. Their attention becomes irrelevant because you're not growing for them. You're growing for the version of you that almost gave everything away. And here's what often happens. As you rise, they notice, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically, but they feel it. They sense the shift. The version of you that was once so available is no longer waiting by the door. Your energy isn't directed toward them anymore. It's focused on your purpose, your peace, your future. That absence, that redirection becomes a wake-up call they didn't expect. But by then, something bigger has happened. You've changed. You're no longer the person who is waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself, and whether they return or not is no longer the point. The point is, you didn't sit in the ashes. You rose. You evolved. You stopped living in the what-ifs and started building the what's next. You stopped asking when they'll come back and started asking how you can never lose yourself again, and that kind of growth. It speaks louder than any comeback ever could. You reclaim your emotional independence, and that's when real peace starts to anchor itself inside you. For so long, your sense of happiness, security, and self-worth may have been unknowingly tied to someone else's availability. You felt okay when they reached out, when they responded, when they showed interest. But the moment there was silence, sudden distance, inconsistency, or emotional coldness, you spiraled. You started questioning your worth, wondering what you did wrong, and losing sleep replaying old conversations like a loop stuck on pain. That wasn't love, it was emotional dependence dressed up as devotion. At some point, you realize that every time you base your value on someone else's behavior, you're handing them the keys to your peace. You're making their actions the thermostat for your emotional climate. And deep down, you start to feel it. The exhaustion of living on edge, always waiting for a message to land, a call to come, a sign that you still matter. But emotional dependence is a prison, even if the door is wide open. And the day you stop looking outside yourself for rescue is the day you step out of that cell. Reclaiming emotional independence doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop collapsing. You stop needing someone else to confirm what you already know deep down, that you are worthy, lovable, and enough. It means you wake up and decide how your day will feel, regardless of who reaches out or who doesn't. You learn to fill your own emotional cup, to soothe your own fears, to affirm your own voice. You stop giving someone else the job of regulating your emotions, and you take ownership of how you feel, how you respond, and what you allow. This inner strength doesn't make you hard, it makes you solid. You become less reactive, less needy, less attached to proving your worth. You start to love with freedom, not fear. You let people come and go without it shaking your foundation. You no longer collapse when someone walks away because you've built a home within yourself. You've found your anchor not in their promises, but in your own truth. And when you reach that place, everything changes. You stop trying to control the connection. You stop chasing clarity outside of you. You begin to live again, fully, freely, unapologetically. And the irony, that's usually when they feel the shift and try to come back. Because emotional independence is rare, it's magnetic. It says, I love you, but I don't need you to feel whole. And that kind of energy is not just attractive, it's powerful. It puts you in charge of your life again. And more importantly, it ensures that no matter what happens next, you'll never lose yourself in someone else's absence again. You set boundaries that protect your peace, and that's when the world around you starts to respond differently. For too long, your boundaries may have been blurry, or maybe they didn't exist at all. You were always available, always forgiving, always understanding beyond what was healthy. You gave second chances, then thirds and fourths, not because you didn't see the pattern, but because part of you was afraid to lose the connection. And in that fear, you allowed too much, excused too much, tolerated behaviors that didn't align with your values, all in the name of love. But love without boundaries is not love, it's sacrifice. It's the slow erosion of yourself, worth disguised as patience, and eventually you wake up tired, not just physically, but emotionally, tired of being taken for granted, tired of always being the one to hold it all together, tired of waiting for someone to respect you when you haven't yet demanded that respect with your actions. That's when the shift happens, quietly at first. You begin to say no, you stop responding to late night texts, you don't allow inconsistency to disguise itself as affection anymore, you stop letting sorry be enough without changed behavior. Setting boundaries is not about building walls, it's about drawing lines of self-respect. You're not pushing people away, you're inviting in only those who are willing to meet you with the same clarity and integrity you now show to yourself. You stop performing for love, you stop explaining your worth. You don't justify your distance when someone crosses a line. They either adjust or you release, and that's where peace lies, not in keeping people close at all costs, but in protecting the space where your peace breathes. Boundaries also reset the dynamic. When you stop engaging with old patterns, those patterns can no longer thrive. The person who once relied on your emotional availability to feel secure now has to face the silence of their own inconsistency. They no longer get easy access to your energy, and in that absence, they're forced to reckon with what they lost. Sometimes they come back, not because they've changed, but because your boundary changed the game. You're not the same version of yourself who accepted the bare minimum. You've raised your standards, not to punish, but to protect. This kind of clarity becomes your new normal. It allows you to breathe deeper, to rest without anxiety, to connect from a place of truth rather than fear. You stop confusing love with endurance. You start seeing that real connection doesn't require you to shrink, bend, or break. And with every boundary you honor, you reinforce the message, I am worthy of being treated with respect, or I will walk away in peace. That's the power of protecting your energy. That's what love looks like when it's rooted in self-respect. And that's when people either rise to meet you or remove themselves. Either way, your peace remains intact. You detach from outcomes and anchor into your worth, and in doing so, you experience the kind of freedom you didn't know you were missing. In the past, everything hinged on what if. What if they come back? What if they change? What if this time is different? That attachment to an outcome waiting for the return, the text, the apology, kept you trapped in a cycle of emotional suspense. You were mentally rehearsing scenarios, emotionally preparing for possibilities, physically stuck in place. You were living for a moment that hadn't even happened and may never happen, and the cost, your presence, your peace, your progress. But when you begin to value yourself deeply, your desire for a specific result starts to loosen. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. You understand that your healing is not dependent on them realizing what they lost. You stop looking for signs and start listening to your soul. You trade anxiety for alignment. You trade fear for faith. Not faith in them, but faith in you, and from that place, detachment becomes your superpower. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means you're no longer emotionally enslaved to someone else's actions. You're no longer triggered by their silence or hooked by their sudden attention. Whether they come back or stay gone no longer defines your self-worth, because you're not chasing closure. You're creating it. You're not proving your value, you're living it. And when you get to this level of emotional maturity, it becomes clear your peace is no longer up for debate. You begin to make choices from your center, not from your fear of losing someone. You don't compromise your standards for temporary connection. You don't entertain confusion for the sake of companionship. You're not asking, do they still want me? You're asking, does this align with the life I'm creating? That shift in focus is everything. It takes you out of emotional survival mode and into self-led empowerment, and ironically, that's often when they return, because your detachment feels different. It's not a tactic, it's not a game, it's the quiet strength of someone who no longer needs validation to know they're enough. They feel your absence not just in physical distance, but in energetic withdrawal. They realize they can no longer rely on your emotional availability to keep them grounded. But by then, you've already chosen a new foundation, one built on peace, purpose, and deep self-respect. You're no longer hoping to be chosen, you are the choice, and whether they return or not becomes irrelevant because you've already come back to yourself. When you truly move on, it's not just about walking away physically, it's about releasing the emotional weight you once carried. It's about choosing to no longer live in the shadow of someone else's indecision. You stop waiting, stop wondering, stop negotiating your worth. You shift the focus inward, and that shift is everything. You no longer live in reaction to someone's presence or absence. Instead, you begin to build a relationship with the one person who has always deserved your attention. You. That's when the return begins, not from them, but from you to you. And when that inner reunion happens, everything outside begins to reflect it. Your energy starts to feel different, lighter, freer, more grounded. You're not checking your phone out of anxiety. You're not hoping your worth will be proven through someone else's realization. You stop performing for love and start living in your power. And ironically, this is exactly when they feel your absence most deeply. Because it's not that you've disappeared from their life, it's that you've disappeared from their control. That magnetic pull they once had is now neutralized by your clarity, your peace, and your standards. And that calm confidence, it becomes impossible to ignore. But by the time they reach out, something has changed. You're no longer looking for closure in their words. You've already created it through your growth. You're no longer needing their presence to feel whole because you've stopped outsourcing your value. The longing that once clouded your vision is replaced with discernment. Now you look not at who they were, but at whether they truly align with who you've become. You're not afraid to say no, not afraid to walk away again, because this time you're walking towards something greater, yourself. And maybe they come back with new words, maybe even new actions, but you're no longer in the business of gambling your peace. You now understand that love is not measured by return, it's measured by consistency, alignment, and respect. And if they cannot meet you in your growth, you no longer shrink to meet them where they left you. You stop choosing history over healing. You stop choosing chemistry over clarity. You've learned the difference between attention and intention, and that wisdom is your armor. So when you finally move on and they show up again, let it be a testament to your power, not your pain. Let it remind you that your growth speaks louder than silence, louder than absence, louder than every maybe you once clung to. Because now you've learned the goal was never to get them back. The goal was always to get yourself back, and you did. That's the real return. That's the real victory. That's the love story that never lets you down. The one you build with yourself. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and most importantly, for showing up for yourself. If this message spoke to your heart, it's because deep down a part of you is ready to move forward, to heal, to grow, and to stop waiting for permission to live your truth. You've already started shifting just by choosing to listen to something that supports your self-worth. You are no longer here to chase what's unclear. You're here to become the clearest version of you, and whether they come back or not, remember, your peace, your growth, and yourself, love are not dependent on anyone's return. The love you've been looking for has always been within you, waiting to be claimed. I hope you carry this message with you as a reminder of your strength and potential. Come back to it whenever doubt creeps in, or you forget just how powerful you are when you choose yourself. You're not broken, you're becoming, and every time you choose growth over fear, you rise. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your energy, and always lead with your truth. Thank you and goodbye for now. You've got this.